Well, it's 0 degrees right now.
It's not.
I'm sitting on the deck recording this outside. No, I'm kidding.
It's a balmy 14 here. So yeah, it is a balmy 14 here. But it's sunny, and you know what? We'll take it. It's winter. That's what we get when we move to places that we move to. It is January 14th, the year. Yeah, folks, it's 2025. Welcome, everybody. Listen to the Crushing Iron podcast. This is episode 826.
Yeah, I'm looking outside, and it's going to be tough, but I think I'm going to venture out. I'm not sure what I'm going to do, though. I'm going to get out
for a nice little walk.
At some point, I might.
Yeah, I mean,
thinking about busting out the ski gear and putting on my ice skates.
Ooh,
yeah.
Make sure you let someone know before you head out.
In case I fall through.
Yeah, in case you fall through.
I mean, it's been solid for a month, and it's.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot how you didn't you say it's like it froze over the earliest you've ever seen it freeze over?
Yeah, by far. And now, I mean, there's no plunging in sight, man.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. Yeah,
So,
you're gonna have to like battle axe it to find yourself a hole.
Yeah,
we got bombarded last week with snow, like 12, 14 inches total for the week. No school. Everything, like, you know, streets are terrible, greenway's terrible. I mean, it's funny how like we get into these zones and we like embrace things that we would normally find miserable, like the trainer, right? Some people get in this trainer zone, they don't want to get off it, and then some people, you know, when it gets nicer outside, they ride outside and they're just so resistant to being indoors. And so I remember back and you know this from going way back, like I used to be all about the treadmill. I mean, I think I've done a 17, 18 miler on the treadmill before. Yeah. I mean, didn't faze me at all. It was actually my preference. Well, now I fucking loathe it. The last thing that I would do is fucking be on the treadmill. It feels like light years. And so last year when I was kind of stuck to the being on the treadmill, it was a good solid reminder of how much I absolutely hate that thing. And I was on it again yesterday just because I wanted to run hard, and the weather was like 2 or 3 degrees, and that just wasn't really conducive to coming off the bike and running hard. And but even today, I was like, God, can I just get like maybe some high single digits? I'd be happy to roll with that. But I just forgot how much I fucking loathe that thing. It's nice to have in an emergency, but God, like, am I all about I'm like way better off being outside. I mean, I feel accomplished when I'm done because, frankly, not from a fitness standpoint, from the fact that I was able to like withstand not hopping off in the monotony and the boredom that ensues on the treadmill. But yeah, give me outside all day long. And I think just like even being cooped up for like a week, mostly inside, outside of like fucking shoveling snow every other minute, it seemed like, which I would also say I'm way out of shoveling shape. I mean, I went from, and I don't have a snowblower, so I'm straight from like, I'm still trying to get this Midwest, like, you know, shoveling thing, like, you know, the outline of how you're supposed to do it in the most efficient way. But dear God, is it, it's one of those things where I feel like I should have like definitely put it in Training Peaks, but I didn't.
That's a lot of athletes do that, but I was going to challenge you to get off. Well, I mean, first of all, I guess we've kind of flip-flopped because I actually like the treadmill now, but I usually just walk on it. But challenge you to get off that treadmill and walk outside in your shorts with no shirt and lay down in the snow for a bit. See how that feels.
I think I saw like half our neighborhood kids doing that. Wasn't that some like TikTok thing last week with all the snow everybody got?
Oh, was it? I don't know.
I think it was. Yeah, I saw these kids running around doing this. I'm like, what's wrong with you people? Like, go put some clothes on. Yeah, I don't know that anybody wants. I still got kind of the dad bod right now, so I'm not sure anybody wants to see me shirtless.
I'm not showing off. I just feel the sensation on your back. I was doing that when it snowed up here about a month ago, and it's pretty cool. But I mean, of course, I was getting right back in the sauna, so I don't know if you got a sauna handy.
I mean, you got quite the setup up there. You got a lake, you got ice, you got cold plunge, you got sauna, you got like the world is your oyster right now for all these temperature changes.
Trying, man. I mean, it's like up in Wisconsin in the winter, people have always been searching for things to do in the winter, and usually that leads most people downtown to the Village Tavern.
Yeah, don't say drinking and eating. Yeah, that's pretty much what they do.
So I'm trying to come up with alternative options.
Well,
and doing pretty good. That's why I got the bed and nails thing. I'm getting other things going too.
Whoa! You got a bed of nails?
Yeah, but it's it's like a plastic.
Okay. I was gonna say, dude, you're
I'm
going
not
ice skating
hardcore.
today. You got a bed of nails. Like this is that sounds like one of those late night purchases.
Yeah, kind of. It was before Christmas. It was a Christmas present.
I like it, man. I like it.
I like it because it was just good. It's good for meditation. You can kind of relax.
That's true. I can see that. And it's like the time of year everybody got all these new gadgets for Christmas, or it's the start of the year and they're looking forward to the season, and like we had, little sabbatical in December, and then, January kind of started off not probably ideal for, a lot of people. It never starts out perfect for pretty much anybody, but as I was kind of going through some of the athlete forums and seeing athletes get ready for this year and looking at like what races people have going on and how many races, and I'm always reminded of like when we look at our season and we look at the things we want to, and this is for every triathlete, right? Like whether you're a person who's just getting into the sport and wants to do like a couple sprints or an Olympic, or you're an athlete that wants to do a few 70.3s and a few fulls. Especially if it's like anything but your first year, because the first year for all athletes is just exploratory and exciting, right? Anything you do is usually pretty exciting and usually works, just because it's a total change in stimulus. As long as you're like borderline somewhat consistent and you're working out, then you're going to progress and you're going to get better at what you're doing. And I think that's like one of the things that I think people forget. I think that's why you see a lot of people go through like the sophomore slump, is they do all these things, in the very first year of training, where it's just all you really need to do is exercise and train and be consistent. And then the next thing you know, you're going to be in a lot better shape than you were before. Well, then in year two, right, or year 2, 3, 4 after that, when you've got athletes that go back and they look, and everyone gets, what I always find, like when people review their year and they get excited after time off, is no one is ever more excited than when they come out of like a period of non-training or time off. And I think it's very representative of the lack of, like, when you have extra mental space and extra emotional space and you're not as physically tired, you have all this energy, you want all these things. I want to be more specific this year. I want to do these specific blocks. I want to do some more testing, and I want to do this and this. And I think that's great, right? So if you're one of those athletes who's gung ho and who wants to do a lot of different things this year, or wants to be more specific, well, I can just tell you this from the conversations I've had this week with athletes, is that, well, if you want to be more specific this year, then the most important thing you can do is find a specific outline that works, and don't make it like the 110% of what you think you can do, because this is the same thing with work. Like, people go through these periods of time, like these purple patches of time during, their business or their profession, where things feel really easy, and then they take more on. And then when things get hard, they feel overwhelmed. And that's so true when it comes to athlete training, athlete volume. And what they're trying to do is, everyone, when they feel like they've got no week spent up, right? You're coming on November, December, you haven't trained a lot, you're getting ready for, the season, and you're mentally fresh, you're emotionally, charged, and you're physically feeling really good, right? Because you don't have any built up fatigue, because you haven't really done that much. And life is pretty easy, right? And then you plan out this year, and you plan out, or you want to do these specific blocks or this specific testing. And then about a week or two into it, you figure out, okay, my year isn't going to go like that. My life isn't going to go like that. Now what do I do? And while both you and I are very, respectful of those that like to do like a whole annual plan, and this is what I'm going to do, this is how I'm going to periodize things, this is when I want to do this. The fact of the matter is, for 85, 90, maybe more percent of people, that just doesn't work. Because after a week or two of the year, you've already gotten sick. You've already had some big life change. You've already missed a few workouts. You've already changed your race schedule. You've already decided this event won't work. I mean, I've already had athletes who legit turned in their race form the next day, had a total change of plan. And so while I appreciate and embrace the planning nature, because that's kind of who I am, for some things, is you can have like a very loose penciled in outline, but the best thing you can do is to plan out your week and how I'm going to execute this week and then do it again. That's why I think traditional periodization, we talked about this, I think, or sometime in the midsummer this last year, is not, it's not dead, but the 3 weeks on, 1 week off is really hard for people now because a lot of people aren't even stringing that much together. But the best thing you can do is to get the first week right and then pretending like you're starting over. And then the next week and do it as right as possible. And then turn over the next week as right as possible. Like there is absolutely no reason to feel stuck and rigid, which is, again, why people fail on these pre-purchase 16, 20, 24-week plans, because after the first 2 or 3 days, they're off schedule. And so the best thing you can do, instead of planning way out and having these huge expectations, when I want to do this testing, when I want to do these, find these new performance metrics, when I want to adjust my zones, when I want to do these TTs, these are races that I have, this I want to do my base, my build, my race specific, is to take each week and try to kind of hit all the things you need to hit to be successful, and then stack those weeks together. And then when you get a very clear picture, right, like 6 to 8 weeks out of the race you either know you're going to do because you've actually signed up, not that you wanted to sign up for and never did and it sold out, but do all these things and then stack them instead of just looking at this week. That's it. Just look at this week and nail it. And then after you've stacked, because this is the problem with most athletes, is they want to predict and plan for what they hope they're going to do or how life is going to be 8 weeks from now, and then what they want to accomplish after that, instead of completing 8 weeks as life dictates, right? Life on life terms, right? The training you actually got in, and then going backwards and figuring out what's going to be something you want to highlight or continue to work on, or that worked going forward. And most athletes don't plan from the back to the front. They want to plan all going from the front. And that's just something that I think a lot of people need to realize, understand as we're kind of getting through this year, is that it is perfectly fine to just do a couple weeks up and then work our way back.
Yeah, it's really, it is interesting, man, because sometimes what I'll do is, like especially coming out of holidays, like we're saying, some people have been inconsistent or sick or whatever like that. I'll just give them like 2, maybe 3 or 4 even of pretty, kind of versatile weeks that are pretty, they sort of cover some bases. They're fairly decent, as far as volume, but not huge. But I'm like, here, let's just see if we can nail this 4 weeks in a row and just get there. Right. I know it's like, some people want variety and we talk about that. And I mean, I think it's cool and everything, but there's something massively important to me about nailing fundamentals. And if you can get, let's just say that long run's 50 minutes or whatever, by the end of 4 weeks, if you feel like that 50-minute run, you really have a good handle on it, that means you can run a lot further. You know what I mean? But it's sort of like owning where you're at. And I talk about that a lot. I'm pretty into that sort of thing. And, it's sort of, everybody wants to always build. And I think obviously that's part of it, but I also think master is a place that kind of gets overlooked. We kind of just sort of like, drive through the mastering part of things. Just like, yeah, I kind of got that down. Let's just move it up. It's like, and then you forget how you got there. And I think a lot of times the more you can really understand what's going on with your particular workouts and really having, maybe say by the end of 3 weeks, your 50-minute run, you like feel it's really balanced or something like that, or you feel like you're really getting it doesn't sting you too hard after that week that you just put in. Then, man, it's like you're winning. It's just hard to see it unless you can really have an idea that, you understand that, like, oh, this is like, 3 weeks ago, I was kind of like, oh, this is kind of a longer run. Now it feels like a piece of cake. And I think there's a lot of progress in stuff like that, even though you're not. And man, I was watching this thing about this ultra guy. He talks about, he's got a YouTube channel, and he's like, he called it the hidden dirt, or like the the part of ultra nobody wants to talk about or something like that. And
Oh yeah. Yeah.
one of those types of things. And you know, and I feel as I was watching, I'm like, okay, now this makes sense. It's sort of like, you know, that first ultra, people just want to conquer the world and they're just like totally into it and all this kind of stuff. And then they get done and they feel pretty good about it or whatever. And now it's like, where do we go from here? And then they put another one like that on the book and they're just burn out about halfway through training. And then they get to the race and halfway through it, they've got, you know, like 12 hours to go and they just hate it. And it's sort of like this, I think a lot of times, and I think I did this to some degree, my first Ironman, I kind of, you know, pushed the envelope a little bit, you know, for my history, and I went up pretty quick and I pulled it off and everything. But sometimes I wonder if I went, you know, a little too fast in that progression. And then it slowly kind of caught up with me as far as burnout, you know. So I've been in and out of this burnout phase. So that's why I always like to kind of, you know, back to Costanza, George, what's his daddy? Frank. Stopping a little short.
Stop a little short.
You know, I'm just really into that concept. I'm like, leave a little on the table kind of thing.
Yeah. That's a really interesting way to look at it. And I think it's so true for a lot of people, is that like especially like right when you get into the sport, I mean, there's two things that resonated there with me on a really high level, is that the last thing you said, which is like kind of my new phrase this year, is stimulate, don't obliterate. And most people just want to obliterate it. And the catch-22 part of that is going to the first point about, you know, how you went so hard and so in and saw such great results right after that first year, that you kind of like, you almost burn out from the success of a short-lived dream, right? Like that you did so well in such a short period of time, but you also knew what it took to go all in for you and what that looked like. And so you're kind of reticent to be like, hey, maybe I don't want to go back that much again, because I know what I gave up. I know what I sacrificed. I know how hard I worked. And that's what it took to get there. But and I think we oftentimes get lulled into thinking that that's always the way that we always have to do it. Right? And that there's not 17 different ways we can be successful to be better at the distance we want to be better at this year. I mean, I've talked openly about that. Is like, there's been lots of years where when I've been able to go all in and done hours and had great results. And since then I've struggled with, you know, being like, I don't have that. So it's that all or nothing, right? I can either do it all or I'm not doing any of it, instead of just, you know what, there's a good recipe for what we can work the best now. And it doesn't have to be the same thing that worked then. Because even then, even in your very first year of training, like for Ironman Wisconsin, we could have done things 19 different ways. Mm-hmm. Maybe you'd have been faster, maybe you'd have been slower, right? But I think a lot of times we get this, again, like going back to that sophomore slump, you have to work harder. I mean, that's the same thing in like all professional sports, especially for quarterbacks. They come in the league and they take the league by storm, and no one knows their tendencies. No one knows their, you know, what they like to do. And then as they get game film, people figure them out. And then they can't just do what they do. They have to think 3 or 4 steps beyond what they want to do, because they have to think beyond what everyone else is predicting. That's why you see a lot of people struggle. And, you know, especially not even the whole season, after the first like 4 or 5 games, once people get game tape and learn you got to go to a whole different level. And I think that's also true for athletes. Like when we take these, when we take these years, and that's so true for so many. And it's also true for different training methods, right? You see a lot of platforms or coaches, you know, that it's a make it or a break it. You know, I'm either going to make you or I'm going to break you. And the thing is, if you go hard, especially with like the higher intensity all the time training, is that you very well might see really, really good results in like a 4 to 8 month span. But what happens is, here's the negative to that, right? And it goes back to what you talked about, is like going, you were, in my opinion, your debut Ironman was pretty fucking incredible. I mean, you freaking nailed it on so many levels on a really hard course in your first one, from barely being a triathlete for like over a year. What happens is, when you get a taste of success, now that you have that measuring stick, you have the this equaled that. this work, this type of work, these type of hours, this type of stress, this type of intensity equal this result that I got. And good God, do I love that result. Mm-hmm. And sometimes just thinking of that and what it cost you, right? If your life is different and you have more stress and you have more responsibilities, or your perspective has changed, right? And you're like, I'm not really sure I want to give up that kind of time, mm-hmm. Then it kind of makes you resistant to being successful again. And if you want to be successful, you're afraid of burning out. And that's, again, like I said, like that's something I have just struggled with, frankly, in the last 3 to 4 years, is kind of redefine what I identify as success and how I want to get there. But going back to like going all in and going really, really hard, and like, cause you have I both, like, we have a lot of athletes that come from like, I go too hard too often, but that's just what worked for me. I'm like, it worked for you for 6 months.
Right.
And obviously you've plateaued and you've dug yourself a hole and you've created a system and a body to where you are anaerobic and you are glycogen dependent 24/7. You can only dig that hole so far before it starts to collapse on you. And that's what's happening. And so you have to, it's like, do you want to have, and this is the trickiest part of the business, right? For coaches is explaining and really getting athletes to buy into the long-term success, not just from a training and a racing standpoint, but also from just like a quality of life, like because all they want to do is follow what professionals do. But it'd be interesting to hear if you polled athletes, right? If you said, all right, listen, you can hit every PR you want to have this year, all of them. But the next 2 years, you might struggle. Or you can have a really good year this year and build a really great foundation and become really, really aerobically efficient, and you can treat your body really well and you can do the right things. You'll have some good races this year, and the next year you'll be even a little bit better. But then in the third year, you're going to be an absolute machine that can never reverse course. What would people choose? Most would choose, I'll take this year. Yeah. I'll take this year, right? They want it all right now. And then what happens is they do that. They go hard. They get this short-term stimulus and these quick adaptations. They think all of a sudden this is how it's supposed to work all the time forever. And then their life changes and their body changes and their stress changes. And especially when you come from like a high stress demand, then you can't do it. I mean, it was interesting going back and listening to some of like the podcast post Kona about how Gustav Iden and Christian Blumenfeld, they both had very non-ideal days, and they both kind of openly said, I think we did a lot of things wrong, and they pretty much did the exact same thing they did the time before that they had so much success in. And so even like professionals, like there's a million ways to do things, but it's finding something that's sustainable. Not that you can do this week, not that you can do even for this month, but what can you do all year? And then what's going to benefit you in the long run to be healthier? Because I'm telling you, like burnout is a choice. It's a choice. Mm. And I told this to a swimmer I worked with on Sunday. She's 13, came from just competitive soccer background, really, 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 really good, and just said she's burnt out from it. And in our first lesson, she got done, and I said, let me tell you something. I said, burning out is a choice. It's not your parents' fault. It's not your coach's fault. It's up to you. And that's a lot of responsibility for a 13-year-old. But regardless of whatever expectations are put on you, regardless of what you think people want, it's all about what you want. Do you want to have fun, and do you want to work hard, and do you want to get better? And if all those answers are yes, then you'll be on the right trajectory. But always have fun and always keep perspective, because if not, you'll end up quitting a sport you loved. Because I did that. I was that swimmer. I was super competitive. I was high expectations. I thought I knew what I needed to do to get to where I wanted to go. I could have gone a lot of places in swimming, and definitely could have swam collegiately and probably even better. But I just got burnt out. And I quit one day crying in the pool because I was so burnt out. Couldn't feel anything. I was working so hard, kicking so hard, I couldn't feel any pain. And I got out of the water, walked over to Coach Lisa Richards and said, I quit. And then waited for my parents to pick me up. And that was the end for then of a sport that I absolutely loved. Absolutely loved. It was my life. But it all came to an abrupt stop because I had put way too much pressure on myself to be the best and to want the best, and then wasn't willing anymore. I wasn't willing to do anymore what I thought was required to be the best instead of what I thought I needed to do to feel the best. And that's, I think, as we do this as adults, we should want to feel the best. What feels the best? Like, and you said in the very first podcast, one of my favorite lines you've ever given, I use it all the time, is like, pretty much not every workout, but more often than not, 85-90%, you should feel better than when you should feel better after a workout than when you started. Mm-hmm. And that is just not the case for most people. They just feel destroyed. And it's like this, like running ourselves in the ground as a badge of honor, and like getting sick and injured repeatedly as a badge of, I threw up after my ride. Like those are not good things. Like none of those are positives. Like that is your body's way of saying it's revolting against you. The smartest thing on the planet, still smarter than any computer, like your body is saying like, hey, like your choices today really suck. So I'm telling you right now that this is too hard and this is too much.
Yeah.
And I just think that there's so much we could do, like for ourselves to plan for long-term success than short-term burnout with maybe a little bit of a performance gain that you would ultimately pass down the road if you just did things right in the near future.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that burnout is a choice, and I totally agree with that. And I think what happens is we will get our ego in the way a lot of times, and I do it, you do it, we all do it. It's like, I'm tired, I don't want to do this workout, maybe I'll just do a 20-minute run or whatever. And like, then you get going, you're like, screw that, I got to prove to myself that I can do 60 minutes. Or hard hill repeat. We start doing things like that to kind of be like, all right, I'm moving now, let's go. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And I've been kind of in this spot where I've been sort of rethinking my strengths and weaknesses and what that means. I think, you ask a typical athlete, hey, what's your strength and weaknesses? And typically it'd be the swim's my weakness. I think my bike's my strength. And I've been trying to think of it in terms of like, for me, that would be kind of maybe an obvious answer, but I don't really necessarily think my swim is a weakness. It's certainly not in my age group. And, I get it done, and I feel pretty good getting out usually. And I think that really is the key. It's like, I don't feel like it cooked me anymore. I used to. I'm at a point now where that's different, but I'm looking at my weaknesses more like, if I go back to last week or last year, what was my weakness? And I think it was my core, my lower back, and my nutrition. And what am I going to do about it? It wasn't like, I was talking to Athy yesterday, and he was like going to like a CrossFit thing or something like that, and he's squatting, and he's like squatting more, and his legs are fine because he's been doing triathlon and riding a bike and running a lot, and his legs are really strong. But the minute he gets any kind of upper body going, he's just like a wimp, so I think it's something to pay attention to. And I think for me, for my money, I think almost spending, if I got an hour and 15-minute ride and that's all I got is an hour and 15, I think you get more bang out of your buck for doing like core work or upper body work. Because when I get in that Ironman bike, it really, obviously on some level it's the legs, but it's usually I'm starting about that second loop or kind of into it. It's my back and neck and my ass, or, all these things. And certainly that probably relates a little bit to the legs, and I get it, but I think even then getting off and my legs felt pretty good on the run. It was just more like cramps and gas and stuff like that. So I think I probably ate too many of those precision gels, and because I was trying, you get on that race and you're like, this seems like the way to do it. And you just blow up. And we were talking about before the podcast, I just think I ate too much crap that day. I didn't need to eat so much crap. And every time you kind of get tired, you just shoot with more. and then you kind of have a little spike, and then you go down a little bit further, and you're up and down and up and down. And then, I got on the run, and I was just felt like I had to go into the portalet all day, but I really didn't. It was just a gaseous kind of pain, And to me, that was the weakness of the race. I could have probably had a much better run without that. And I think if I was a little stronger in the upper body and my core, and I could have probably had a much better ride too, So I don't know. And my point of that whole thing was I didn't really train that long. I didn't go super long hardly ever all year, but I felt fine as far as capability. It's just the other things that didn't have the the real strength to hold up or whatever.
It's so, I mean, again, we talked about this before we went live today, but it's so interesting. Like when you say it like that, how, I think how we don't give our bodies enough credit ever.
Right.
Like
yeah.
how smart we are.
Point.
You know what I mean? Like how, cause if you'd have been out in the fucking Sahara or like stranded, like 15 miles away and you didn't have anything with you and you got these like cravings and you didn't have a gel on you or like, all this precision, processed crap, what would have happened? You'd be like, oh, I can't make it, man. No gel. I'm out. I've been happy to be here, figure out the podcast without me. Mm-hmm. No, like you would have legit been totally fine and made it to where you needed to go. But I mean, it's like it's really telling, like, and we all do this, right? Is how impulsive we are to not let things ride out and figure out like, and yeah, should you always let your body figure it out before you intervene? No, but you should give it a shot. Like your body's so intelligent, like you give it a shot to figure out what's going on instead of, sometimes force feeding it a certain type of fuel or a certain type of intensity. Right. It's like, give it time to, it's very similar to like how we always talk about, don't decide what you can or you can't do until you're done with your warm up and your first few intervals. Cause you got no idea. You might start off feeling incredible, right? The first 5 minutes and then feel like trash afterwards. Or you might start off, your legs might start to feel like really sluggish and really slow. And then after 30 minutes, they open up and you're like, oh my God, I feel like a champion. Like you never know. And so I think sometimes we pollute's not the right word, but we confuse and start to send our body in like 17 different ways where it's like, hey, I was like, I can't figure out what we're doing here. I can't figure out like what we're trying to accomplish because we're doing this and we're doing that and we're not doing it for very long. So we can't, and that's the thing, right? Is most people think that like, you got to have, all this repeatable testing. But if you can't stick to a method for long enough, you won't even know what works. But we're so sporadic. Like we've been doing this thing for the last week or two. I just don't know that's working for me. And then you want to change it up. Like we don't even know what's working yet. It's been like 2 weeks. And then the other flip side, you're like, hey, dude, I went to the gym today. Can totally feel the gains in my run. I did like a few deadlifts and a few squats, and I'm telling you right now, I can feel it in my glutes and my hamstrings. I'm like 10 times stronger. It's just like our impulsive nature to be either distracted or overly focused on one specific thing instead of like the body of work and just overall patience. And I think it was just really interesting to hear you say how like that ride transpired. But what would have happened if you like if you were, on the flip side, if you were on a training ride doing the loops with M and you ran out of stuff, because I've seen you fucking do it before. You use like 2 bottles and you get done with the ride and you're like, yeah, feel pretty good. Like you got 3 water bottles from old school, Little Debbie Ironman Chattanooga bottles with some silver duct tape on it, and you make it back home in better shape than most people, and you barely even ate anything.
I know. And
it's just, isn't it right? It's just really interesting how we panic and we do that and we think there's like an automatic I don't know if exterior is the right word to use, but outside answer that we need instead of like an internal solution that we're pretty capable of figuring out on our own if we give ourselves time to figure it out instead of panically making these rash decisions that end up having really negative effects on the rest of our day or the rest of our week or the rest of our training cycle.
Yeah, it's so interesting, man. It even goes back to what one of my new things is I'm really curious about is I don't know if you've ever heard of this concept of dead water, where it's like
It's my swim felt yesterday, but no, I haven't heard of that
concept. Supposedly the best water in the world is pure spring water that comes up from the earth. But rather than, a lot of water is obviously hydrologized, recycled through the air, and, rains, it evaporates, mist comes back down. Supposedly the best water comes out of the earth. But anyway, the point is also this concept of, it's really interesting for me because I'm a huge water guy, right? I've always talked about drinking a lot of water. And, I've always peed a lot, and that's another one of my weaknesses. Like the day before a race, I drink way too much. I end up staying, I think it keeps me up at night, like all these things, right? So what am I doing, right? Do I need that much water? Do I need to hydrate so much the day before? And now there's this concept I'm looking into is like, just like a spring or just like the earth that makes water is like our body makes water out of food, out of, different, whatever's, it's like I'm starting to really be curious about the concept of we don't need to actually drink as much as we want because it's not the actual. You've heard about how water can, a lot of straight water can get rid of nutrients and stuff like that, and there's just sort of this formula within the body about how it either out of food or fruits or whatever different. I guess things that we put in our body, it sort of creates this like, it isn't water, but it's almost like Jello or something that becomes the way that blood is transported through the electricity of it and everything like that. But anyway, the point I'm making is that sometimes is like allegedly, inflammation or, bad knees or something like that, and they call it dead water that we're trying to get out, and it's just stagnant. It's really, I'm just like, I wonder sometimes if we don't drink too much too, and how much can the body handle? And, I've had those bouts of like peeing way too much on the bike and, so it's like it's all this complication and shit like that. So, and like you said, I'll do the course, I'll do 2 loops and maybe on a 1 or maybe 3 bottles or something like that sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I feel fine. So, I'm just looking at it, man. I'm just throwing it out there. Anybody knows anything about that, I'd be interested here.
You should read Waterlogged.
Yeah, it's something like that, maybe.
Yeah. But no, I mean, I think, listen, and we talked about this a ton, but this is the time of year to be, when volume is lower, right, and probably intensity is too, and you maybe have a little bit of extra pep in your step, right? Because the volume isn't as high, fatigue shouldn't be that high, stress shouldn't be that high, at least on a training front, is to just pay more attention to things. And I get on athletes about this all the time. It's like, yeah, but I'm like, you can't even write a word about how a session went, but you want to do a deep dive after a month. What do you want to look at? The pretty graphs and training peaks? Provide some context. Like now is the time to take some extra time and figure these things out, right? Because the things that we're doing, we just aren't paying enough attention to. And we get the excuse, right? Like, is like, I just don't have the time to do it. Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. Get out your phone, scroll all the way through, go to screen time, and tell me you don't have time. Tell me you don't have time to make. We just do it blindly. What we do have time is to read a blog or, a podcast like ours, or a Facebook post or a marketed ad that tells us to do this, and then we do it blindly, and we make assumptions from that, and then we are inconsistent or sporadic, and then we want to make conclusions. Right? You and I talked about this before we went live today. It's like sometimes I feel like scientific research is geared to come out with one specific answer, because if you get that's one specific answer, then you can then use that as marketing material to sell X, Y, or Z. right? So it's like, hey, I've got this thing I want to sell, but I really need is the research to support it, because people like research and they think research is valid and untainted. So if I provide the research, then we can sell this, right? Which is totally backwards, right? Instead of here's research, here's what it can do. Now let's create something that's true and just, and then you go the other way. But so right now, like, make these notes like, hey, I slept great. I did this. I did that. I feel good. I ate this before. I didn't eat this. I wanted to do this. I took this in during, like, make those, like, track that, like, and go back and look. Like, I've been doing that the last few weeks, and it's been very insightful. And that's the only way to find out what works, is to take that extra time. And then that's when you, like we started the podcast with, like, that's when you go back and look at your body of work and figure out what worked and what didn't. Because here's the thing is, even if you're inconsistent, you can look at your inconsistency and see what patterns you did, and then just mirror that going forward. Because if that's really your new normal, then that's your new normal. Like, I had an athlete like, hey, are we going to swim and bike this week? And I'm like, I don't know. You tell me. I had swim and bikes last week and didn't do any. So, like, are we, like, just consistency and then providing context? That's how you get all the valid information that you need to make a plan going forward. And again, like, when the bar is low, like the expectation bar is low, that's when it's the best time to kind of experiment with a few things, because there's like no risk. You're not messing up a training cycle. You're not messing up, like, I had an athlete was like, hey, I'm thinking about signing up for Ironman Wisconsin. When do you think it's too late to decide? And I'm like, I don't know, July. I mean, it's like we're like 8 months out from it being too late to decide on when we're going to sign up for this race. Like, we got a hot minute, let's figure some things out and be detailed with it. And I don't think we take that much time, either because we say we don't have enough, but we do, or we don't think it's important enough, but it is. And because if you can, everyone has their own code. Everyone responds better to certain things. Everyone does worse on certain things. Everyone can handle different things. Everyone likes different things. Like, it's all different. So, like, it's like a great time to be, just be over responsive of listening to your body and yourself and those signs. And if you fuck up, you fuck up, and that's okay. But then ask yourself, like, what did I do? Like, what you said was your biggest mistake on that ride. Like, to me, that would be a huge thing that I would look into during this off season. What I would even do is, like, even try to confirm that was actually the case. Do some things and try to work through some longer things. Again, doesn't have to be on the bike. Can be doing whatever. It could be doing a 2-hour walk outside. And not take anything, and then feeling a certain way and noting that, and then maybe a week or two later you do it, and then when you start to feel down, you just crush, like 2 gels and a bottle of Scratch, and then see what happens.
Right.
Because I mean, again, we can't always take one thing as a this is bad. Sometimes we have to which I know sounds odd, but sometimes we have to, just like we can't be always sure what worked was the best, we always can't assume that what didn't work was wrong.
Right. Well, I mean, I guess, after doing how many Ironman I've done, it's like I've never had that problem before, but this is the first time I was using that sort of strategy on the bike. Either that or it's a damn power meter. It's like, tried to use the power meter, got all tensed up, and, it wasn't my bag, maybe that was it. Who knows, right? Maybe I just was undertrained, but I don't know. I've done it that way many times, so who knows? But yeah, it's certainly crazy, man. I mean, it does. I think that once they lobbed nutrition as the 4th discipline, and it actually kind of almost became its official sport, then it became really, really important, which it is. But I think that it's like, more isn't always better kind of thing. So what's your minimal effective dose? Again, it's sort of like that stuff you talk about with taking drugs all the time. So, hey, I'll take a, prednisone. One is really kind of, feeling good. Maybe I'll take 2 oxy with it or something. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
It's just, maybe we're eating too much out there. I don't know. I mean, we're doing zone 2 work for the most part in that race. I don't know.
Yeah, it's
like you're saying. I mean, how much fat do you burn? How much, like aerobic? How much are you aerobic? I don't know. Maybe I was just too far out of shape. I wasn't aerobic. But it's true. It's like 4th discipline. What's the other? What's the 5th discipline now? I'm trying to remember. They got somebody came up with some.
I mean, it's whatever it is, whatever you need to make money.
Training or something.
Yeah, I mean, whatever you need to make money is always the one you need to buy more things on.
This podcast is the 6th discipline of Ironman.
Podcast is the 6th discipline.
Gotta listen to all 800.
Yeah, exactly. It's right. But no, I think again, we can close it out. Is like there's always more stuff to figure out. But you just need to be patient enough to figure it out and what can be successful for the long term. But then also just always be aware that the long term might be 18 months, the long term might be 36 months, the long term might be 5 years. And what's working now might not be, it might work for this year. It might not work at all next year. Right. So it's always good to kind of revisit what worked and what didn't work, and then what we think going forward is going to be the answer. And then always be willing to, confirm that what we thought worked still works, but also be willing to have the confidence and the humility to go back and think, maybe what worked before wasn't the best, but also what worked might not work anymore. And I need to change that, or that I was just wrong. And I think that as long as you keep a healthy perspective on that, not a knee-jerk reaction, but a healthy awareness, not just changing for change's sake, but just always having an open mind, and then being willing to figure things out. I think that's the most important thing for us to follow through with.
Yeah. Open mind.
Open mind.
And remember, you can always add more logs to the fire. You might as well start with a few,
Yeah, God, no kidding.
It's hard to pull logs out once they're on fire.
Yep. Oh, I like that.
I just came up with that, I think.
You better hold on to that.
You probably have 100 analogies like that.
Oh, yeah, dude. You got to hold on to that one. You better hurry up and make that a coffee mug and sell it before somebody else does.
It's hard. What did I say? It's hard to pull logs out of the fire.
Something. Yeah.
Anyway,
just go back and rewind, and then you can hear it again.
Oh yeah, I can always do that.
You can always do that.
But
oh man,
that would mean I'd have to listen to us again.
Well, I mean, you can fast forward. Exactly. No, I wouldn't want to do that either. That's why we have the utmost respect and love for all you people out there that continue to listen to us.
Every once in a while, my iTunes will just be playing in the background. I won't hear it, and then our podcast will pop up, and I'll be like, what am I doing? What is that? I don't like that.
Yeah, I get
anyway.
That, man. Get it.
All right, wrap it up, dude.
Wrap it up, man. Yeah, as always, we love you guys. We appreciate you. Go to website, c26triathlon.com. It is our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. If you need anything from Mike, he's available. Mike at c26triathlon.com. If you need anything from me specifically, Robbie at c26triathlon.com.
All right, man. Stay warm over there.
Yeah, man. Check it Thursday.
All right, bud. See you.